The first time I saw the machines, I thought it was a mistake. The land I stood on wasn't just dirt and grass, it was my bloodline. My grandfather had broken his back to carve out this ranch from the dry Texas earth, my father had tended it through droughts and storms, and when he passed, the deed had fallen into my hands. Every fence post, every trail, every acre of grazing pasture carried our family's sweat. So when I looked out from my porch that morning and saw steel behemoths tearing across my field like ants devouring a carcass, my gut turned cold. Bulldozers churned up black soil, surveyors hammered down orange stakes, and a convoy of trucks carried piping longer than a man's house. I stormed across the yard, boots chewing into the earth, fists balled tight. At the center of the chaos stood a man in a reflective vest, barking orders. His name was Greg Thompson, head of the Homeowners Association for the growing subdivision just past the ridge. He was a sharp-dressed vulture, slicked-back gray hair, mirrored sunglasses, gold watch gleaming in the sun. I had seen him at town meetings, always loud, always convinced the world bent to his will. "Greg!" I shouted, my voice cutting over the drone of machinery. He turned, smiled faintly, then waved for a backhoe to idle down. "Morning, Jack," he said, like we were neighbors sharing coffee. "Beautiful day for progress, isn't it?" "Progress?" I stopped a few feet from him, dust swirling around my boots. "You're cutting through my goddamn pasture." Greg's smile didn't falter. "Correction. We're laying pipeline through a utility easement. Legally acquired, I assure you. It's all in the paperwork." I felt my jaw tighten. Paperwork? No one asked me a damn thing. This is my land. "Jack," he said smoothly, slipping his sunglasses down the bridge of his nose to look me in the eye, "your land sits between our subdivision and the only water main in 10 miles. We've got families. Kids. We need a direct line, and the county approved it. Eminent domain, utility rights." I tried to be friendly about it, but, well, you know how things are. Friendly. The word burned like acid. I looked past him at the long trench gouged into my field, earth piled high on either side like a scar across skin. Cattle bawled nervously at the noise, dust rose in choking clouds, and the hum of engines drowned out the quiet peace that had always defined this place. "You should have come to me," I said quietly, but the tremor in my voice betrayed the storm inside. Greg clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture as cold as a snake's tongue. "This'll all be done in a week. You won't even notice it. And hey, maybe the property value goes up, huh?" I shoved his hand off and walked back toward the house, every step heavier than the last. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with maps spread across the wood. My ranch stretched for 500 acres, mostly open fields with patches of mesquite and cedar. The subdivision on the ridge was a cancer that had spread in just 5 years, neat rows of houses, identical fences, playgrounds, and signs dictating what color paint your door could be. I'd ignored them as long as I could. But now they had driven a steel vein right into my land. My wife, Emily, touched my shoulder. "Jack, come to bed. You'll drive yourself sick." I shook my head. They cut a wound in the ranch. And Greg Thompson smiled in my face like he owns me. Emily sighed. "We'll fight it." "Fight what?" I snapped, then immediately regretted the sharpness in my tone. "The county already signed off. I don't have money for lawyers. They'll drag me through court until I'm bled dry." She squeezed my hand. "Then we think smarter." Her words lingered. Smarter. The next week was hell. The trench carved deeper, snaking across my fields. Pipes slid into the earth, welded and sealed, vanishing beneath layers of dirt as if swallowing my land whole. I couldn't stop them. Every complaint I filed was met with shrugs or clipped emails citing public utility need. One evening, I stood by the fence line, staring at the subdivision lights glowing in the distance like a second horizon. A truck rolled up behind me, headlights flooding the field. Greg stepped out, casual as ever. "Jack," he said, his voice dripping false sympathy, "I know this is hard on you. But you'll see, once this is done, it won't bother you a bit. Just a pipe underground. Out of sight, out of mind." I didn't answer. My silence must have annoyed him, because he added, "Truth is, this land of yours? It's wasted. 500 acres just for cattle? While we've got hundreds of families needing homes and water? You could sell out, Jack. Make a killing. Retire easy." I finally turned to him, eyes burning. "This land has fed my family for 3 generations. And I'll be damned before I let your plastic suburbia choke it dead." His smile faltered for the first time. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Suit yourself. But one day, you'll thank me." The engine roared as he drove away, leaving me in darkness. The breakthrough came by accident. A week later, I drove out past the ridge to check on cattle near the creek bed. The sun was brutal, baking the ground, and I noticed the creek running low, far too low for this time of year. That's when I remembered something my father once told me: "Water's worth more than gold out here, son. Never forget where it flows." I parked, hiked upstream, and found it a natural spring bubbling out of the limestone, hidden by brush. Cold, clean water trickled into the creek. My father had built troughs from it years ago, but I'd never thought much of it. Now I realized. That spring fed not just my creek, but the underground aquifer the subdivision's shiny new pipeline tapped into. Without it, their entire line was useless. And the spring sat on land just outside my ranch. Untouched. For sale. I stood there, staring at the crystal water pooling at my boots, heart pounding like a war drum. For the first time since the machines arrived, I felt the storm inside me shift into something else. A plan. The spring whispered like a secret the world had forgotten. I crouched by the bubbling water, running a calloused hand through the flow. It was cold, pure, steady, a vein of life hidden in the rock. The subdivision's new lifeline, their precious pipeline, wasn't drawing from some distant reservoir. It was drinking from this. And it wasn't theirs. Not yet. I pulled my phone from my pocket, hands trembling, and snapped photos, marked GPS, recorded video. My father's words echoed: "Water's worth more than gold out here." By the time I returned to the ranch, night had swallowed the hills. Emily was waiting on the porch, worry written all over her face. "You've been gone for hours," she said softly. I sat beside her, staring out at the dark. "I found something. A spring. Not on our land, but close. Feeds the creek, maybe even that aquifer." She frowned. "And?" I turned to her, voice low, certain. "And if I own it, I own them." The next morning, I drove into town and stopped at the county records office. The clerk, an older woman named Martha Clayton, knew me by name. "Morning, Jack," she said, adjusting her glasses. "What brings you in?" I leaned against the counter. "I need parcel information. Land north of my ranch, just past the ridge. Lot 17. She tapped her keyboard, squinting at the screen. "Let's see, 80 acres. Mostly scrubland. Has a spring noted in the survey." I held my breath. "Who owns it?" "Private family trust out of Dallas. But it's been listed for sale 6 months now." She gave me a curious look. "Why? Thinking of expanding?" I managed a thin smile. "Something like that." That evening, Emily and I sat at the kitchen table again, papers spread before us. Mortgage documents, savings account balances, the bare bones of our finances. "Jack," Emily whispered, running a hand through her hair. "This is risky." "Buying 80 acres? That's everything we have." I stared at the maps. "If we don't, Greg Thompson and his HOA own me for the rest of my life. Every drop of water running under this land will belong to them. They'll tighten the noose a little at a time until we're forced to sell." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we buy it." The deal went through faster than I expected. The Dallas Trust was eager to sell, too eager, maybe. Within weeks, the land was mine. I signed the final papers in Martha's office, her eyebrows rising in surprise at how quickly I'd moved. "Congratulations," she said, sliding the deed across the counter. 80 acres more to your name. Not bad in this market. I walked out with the deed in my hand, the autumn wind sharp against my face. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The spring was mine. Greg Thompson found out 3 days later. I was repairing fence posts when his black SUV pulled up, dust clouding behind him. He stepped out, sharp suit gleaming even under the sun, and marched toward me with that smirk plastered on his face. "Jack," he said, voice tight. "You think you're clever?" I didn't bother looking up from the post. "Depends who's asking." He shoved his sunglasses up onto his head. "Don't play games. I know you bought the lot with the spring. You think that gives you leverage?" Now I looked at him. Calm. Steady. "I don't think." "I know." His jaw clenched. For the first time, the man looked rattled. "You don't understand how this works. That water isn't yours to hoard. We have rights. Families need it. The county." I cut him off. "The county gave you a pipeline. Not the source. And last I checked, Greg, property law still means something in Texas. That spring is mine. Which means your pipeline is mine." For a moment, silence stretched between us. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp against the wind. Greg finally leaned close, voice dropping into a hiss. "You think this is over? You're out of your depth, Jack. We've got money. Lawyers. Political pull. You're just a rancher." I smiled faintly, gripping the fence post tighter. "A rancher who just bought your future." He glared at me for a long moment, then turned sharply, shoes crunching on gravel. His SUV roared as he sped away. The war began quietly. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the HOA's attorneys, accusing me of malicious interference with essential infrastructure. They demanded I sign an agreement guaranteeing water access from the spring. I tore it in half. A week after that, county inspectors arrived, citing environmental compliance concerns about my use of the spring. They prowled my land, clipboards in hand, pretending to care about frogs and sediment. I knew exactly who sent them. When that didn't work, Greg himself showed up again, this time with 2 lawyers in tow. They sat in my kitchen, trying to talk circles around me with legal jargon. Emily stood at my side, hand on my arm, as I listened in silence. When they finally stopped, I leaned across the table. "Let me make this simple," I said. "You tore up my ranch without asking. You bled my land dry for your shiny subdivision. But now the tap's in my hands. You want water? You pay. And you pay on my terms." One of the lawyers sputtered, "This is extortion." I shrugged. "This is property law." Greg's eyes burned with fury. "You'll regret this." They left without shaking hands. That night, Emily and I walked out to the spring under the stars. The water shimmered in moonlight, endless and steady, whispering through the rocks. "You've made enemies," Emily said quietly. "Maybe," I admitted. "But for once, we've got the upper hand." I knelt, touched the water, and let it run through my fingers. "This isn't just about land anymore," I murmured. "It's about survival." They thought they could scar my ranch and bury me under it. But they forgot one thing. Emily looked at me. "What's that?" I stood, staring toward the glow of the subdivision in the distance. "You can't build a kingdom without water. And now, I own their crown." The subdivision's pipeline gleamed like a scar across my land, but now the lifeblood it carried was mine to command. At first, Greg Thompson and his HOA tried intimidation. Lawyers, inspectors, even whispered threats from men who parked their trucks just a little too long outside my gate at night. Emily and I grew used to the uneasy silence that followed each knock on the door, the folded letters left on the porch, the voices in town that stopped when I walked in. But fear didn't break me. What they didn't understand was that ranchers live by stubbornness. When you've wrestled calves out of mud in the middle of a thunderstorm, when you've buried your father in soil he spent his life tending, when you've watched drought burn your pastures brown and still come back swinging, you learn how to outlast anything. And I was damn sure going to outlast Greg Thompson. The first true test came on a scorching afternoon. I'd been checking the spring house I'd built to protect the water when a county vehicle rolled up. A young man in khakis stepped out, sweating through his shirt. "Mr. Carter," he asked, clipboard in hand. "That's me." He cleared his throat. "We've had reports that you're unlawfully restricting access to a public water resource." I raised an eyebrow. "Public? This spring sits on my deeded land. Last I checked, that makes it private." He shifted uneasily. "There's pressure from the subdivision. They're claiming hundreds of residents are without sufficient water flow." I folded my arms. "Not my problem. They built a pipeline without my say. If they want water, they can negotiate like civilized people." The young man hesitated, then nodded. "Truth be told, sir, I don't see anything unlawful here. But you'll want to prepare. They're not giving up." He drove off, leaving dust swirling in his wake. That night, Emily sat with me at the kitchen table again, the same spot where this battle had begun. "Jack," she said softly, "they're going to keep coming. They've got money, lawyers, and half the county in their pocket." I rubbed my temples. "Then we take it further." Her eyes widened. "Further?" I looked out the window toward the ridge, where rows of subdivision lights twinkled like false stars. "They think they're entitled to everything they touch." "But water? Out here, water means life. If they want to play hardball, fine. I'll shut them off completely." Emily studied me for a long time. Then she nodded. "Do it." The next morning, I filed paperwork with the county. A water rights claim, backed by hydrological surveys I'd scraped together through favors and old contacts. It wasn't cheap, but it was airtight. Once approved, the HOA couldn't legally pull a drop without my permission. Greg showed up 2 days later, angrier than I'd ever seen him. He stormed up my porch, face red, fists clenched. "You smug bastard," he spat. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Our subdivision is running dry. Families can't bathe, gardens are dying, kids can't drink from taps." I stood calmly in the doorway, Emily at my side. "Sounds like a planning problem, Greg. Maybe you should have thought twice before carving up my land." His voice cracked with fury. "You'll pay for this. We'll bury you in court." I leaned against the doorframe, meeting his glare with steady eyes. "Try. Every day your lawyers waste is another day your taps stay dry. Meanwhile, my cattle still drink." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Finally, he turned, stomping back to his SUV, tires spitting gravel as he tore away. The war turned public after that. Local papers ran headlines, "Subdivision strangled by rancher." Greg painted me as a villain, some heartless farmer starving families for profit. But then other voices rose, old ranchers, townsfolk who remembered when land meant more than concrete driveways and HOA fines. "Jack Carter's not the villain," one rancher told a reporter. "He's standing up for what's his. They stole from him first." Slowly, the tide shifted. The subdivision grew desperate. Tanker trucks rumbled in at all hours, hauling water from distant reservoirs at enormous cost. Tempers flared among the residents. I heard stories of fistfights at HOA meetings, of neighbors screaming at Greg in the streets. And all the while, the spring bubbled on, steady and faithful under my watch. The final confrontation came on a blistering Sunday morning. I was mending a gate when I heard tires crunching on gravel. Greg's SUV again, but this time he stepped out alone. No lawyers. No smug smile. Just a man hollowed out by defeat. He walked up slowly, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse. "Jack," he said quietly, "we're finished. The HOA's broke. Residents are furious. They want my head." I set down my tools and studied him. For the first time, I saw the man behind the polished veneer, desperate, cornered, stripped of power. "What do you want, Greg?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "A deal. You control the spring. Fine. Just sell us water. Enough to keep people alive. I'll sign whatever you want." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the trench gouged through my pasture. The smug way he'd told me this land was wasted. The scar his machines had left on my family's home. I shook my head. "No, Greg. You had your chance. You thought you could bully me, bury me. But this ranch is more than dirt to me. It's my father's legacy. My grandfather's blood. You don't get a drop." His face crumpled, and for the first time, Greg Thompson had no words. He turned, stumbled back to his SUV, and drove away slower this time, like a man who knew the fight was over. Weeks passed. Without water, the subdivision withered. Lawns turned brown, houses went up for sale, and families trickled away. Eventually, the HOA dissolved under lawsuits and bankruptcy. What had once been a shining new development became a husk rows of empty homes baking under the Texas sun. And my ranch? It endured. Cattle drank from clear troughs fed by the spring. Grass grew tall where the scar of the pipeline healed under new soil. Emily and I stood together on the porch one evening, watching the sky blaze orange with sunset. "You did it," she whispered. I nodded slowly. "No," I said. "We did. This land's still ours. And it always will be." As the last light faded, I thought of my father's words once more. "Water's worth more than gold out here, son. Never forget where it flows." I had remembered. And because of that, the ranch, our home, would live on long after the HOA was nothing but dust.